If you go to Google and look up if evolution is a fact or a theory. In almost every instance, Google is going to say that evolution is in fact a fact. Is in fact a fact. Ernest Mara observed the basic theory of evolution has been confirmed so completely that most modern biologists consider evolution simply a fact. Another place in Google it says, it is supported by abundant evidence, observation, and testable hypothesis, allowing us to predict outcome changes and impacts. Scientific evidence shows that the physical and behavioral traits shared by all people originated from ape-like ancestors and evolved over a period of millions of years. It goes on and on and on and on. And so, when I was in school, I'll never forget, they were teaching about, in biology and history, and I always had an inquisitive mind. So I would think outside of the box, or I didn't accept the status quo. I had heard about evolution and the dinosaurs and millions of years, but I also heard about creation in the Bible and that the earth is only less than 10,000 years old. And in my mind, it was very obvious and logical that both could not be true. So here I am many years later, and I'm finding out as I'm reading in Ecclesiastes that God said that if people ignored him, didn't recognize him as God, that he would test them and show them that they are nothing but animals. They reason like animals, they come to conclusion like animals. It's very interesting because in the last passage of Ecclesiastes, God had just said that he has made everything beautiful in his time. And he has also set eternity in the hearts of every man. So nobody is born an atheist. God has placed the knowledge of him in children. That's why children are so easily to believe that there's a God. You got to work hard to not believe that there's a God. So here comes a guy by the name of Charles Darwin. And he puts together a theory about how people evolved over a period of time through the survival of the fittest. Okay? And they adapted. They progress. And that people are still adapting and progressing. But he couldn't give an explanation to how it started, and he couldn't prove to people at that point the evolutionary change. So what he did was he come up with millions of years. Okay, so both things cannot be true. Either God created the heavens and earth, and he created Adam and Eve, and he created man, or we evolved over a long period of time. Which do you believe? If you go to Google and you go at almost any school and universities and you go on the Discovery Channel or any of these shows and you even monuments and everything, and they say, this has been evolved over millions of years, and geologists and everybody have found these fossils, and and it's been a long time coming. But then I read Ecclesiastes, And God said that if you don't recognize me as I am, you're going to think like this. And he says, I'm going to test you. And in chapter 3, in verse 18, and Solomon says, I also thought, as for men, God tests them so that they may see they are like the animals. Think about that. If you believe in evolution, you're just like an animal. I didn't say it, God did. You're just like an animal. He said, God tests men so that they may see that they are like the animals. Man's faith is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. No purpose. You live, you evolve, and you're gone. All of the same breath. Man has no advantage over the animal. Everything is meaningless. So Solomon's looking at life apart from God, and he says, if you want to try to come up with an origin and take God out of the picture, God will test you so you can come up with the idea that you're just an animal. You have evolved from an ape. Now, to me, it's silly. And it's uneducated. And there's no wisdom in that. Yet it's promoted as if it's fact. The Bible makes it really clear in Genesis that God created the heavens and earth. He created something from nothing. And he created Adam and Eve in his own image. And he gave them will, intellect, and emotion. So in order to believe in evolution, you gotta remove God and the basic sensible faculties that he's given you in order to believe a myth by a man like Charles Darwin. And he had an associate, too, that came up with it. And he's elevated by society. And it's taught in every public school. And Solomon goes on to say, all go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust they all return. Who knows? The spirit of man rises upward, and the spirit of the animal goes down on the earth. Do animals go to heaven? He's saying, who knows? If the spirit of an animal, notice he says the spirit of an animal and the spirit of a man. He didn't make any distinction. See, animals don't have a spirit. Only people have a spirit. Humans created in God's image. They're the only ones that have a spirit. Animals have a soul. A soul is your personality. It's who you are. But not a spirit. A spirit is that part of you that's connected to God, that allows you to have a relationship with him. Remove that again, and you're just like an animal. And he says then, if you're an animal, you don't know whether there's an afterlife or not. You're both going to end up in the same place, in the dirt, in the ground. He says, who knows if the spirit of man rises upward and if the spirit of the animal goes down onto the earth. That was this final thing that says that. In other words, if you believe in evolution, you got to be devoid of eternity. God doesn't exist in the afterlife. You know, the old Schlitz commercial, you only go around once in life. You might as well grab all the gusto you can. That is very applicable to a person that thinks like an animal. It was a very popular commercial at the time. Some of you are old enough to remember this. I think it was Schlitz beer commercial. So without being too facetious and too, it's silly. Listen, God created us for his good pleasure. He doesn't want us to think that we came from apes. There's no such thing as Planet of the Apes. That is a myth. There's no such thing as Bigfoot. That is a myth. Okay? There's no such things as aliens in outer space. That is a myth. But people will believe just about anything. I mean, look how many people voted for Biden. And Biden just now pardoned his son after he said he wouldn't. You know who I blame for that? Everybody that voted for him. Because they were all snowballed by one of the biggest cons with the whole COVID thing, the whole mask thing, the whole stolen election thing, the whole millions of votes that somehow got generated that in this election they can't find them. That's what happens, people. When you take God out of the picture, you become a fool. And you begin to adopt views that are totally contrary to what the scripture says and what God says. And then you're going to come to the final conclusion like Solomon says. He's going to say, who knows? Well, you die, fine, you go. You're dead, that's over. I just had a good friend of mine die. I was stunned. And I saw this person just before this person died. And I could see that death was all around this person. I didn't want to say anything, but what a fatalistic view of life to think that, fortunately this person was a believer, but what a fatalistic thing to think that you're nothing but an animal, that you came from an ape and you're evolved. And there isn't, he never did explain, how did everything get started? And they continue to promote that on television and schools. And if you ask, just go to somebody, say, do you believe in evolution or do you believe in creation? And see what they say. Both cannot be true. And what's sad now is that Google, were one of the places where a lot of people go for so-called information, is promoting a lot of lies like Biden did and the Democratic Party did. You got to be able to weed through all that. Find some good sources that you can get the information from. The best source you can get information, if you really want to understand about everything concerning life and death, is to go to the Bible. It's all there. It explains the origin of life. It explains the purpose of life. It explains what God is doing. It explains even future events. So we don't have to be in the dark. God doesn't want us in the dark. He doesn't want us guessing. But if you want to live apart from God, well, he's going to test you. And he's going to show you that you're nothing but an animal. Yeah, Ecclesiastes is a very, very, very pessimistic book, but it's a great book and it helps us to see life apart from God, which is very empty. Is there any encouragement in this? Yeah. It's that we don't have to believe the lies and the myths of fools. We can go to God in faith, believing that he created us in his image, and that he's got a purpose and a plan for each of our lives, and he watches after us. And there is an afterlife that we can spend eternity with him And we can do the things in this life that will count for eternity. We got a couple more chapters to go to Ecclesiastic, but Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, he's going to take us all through this in a most amazing way. God bless you all.